I was a 1973 graduate of the business school. My second co-op job, I went to a small company which was just getting into the outpatient dialysis field, and it was a newer industry at the time. And I was fortunate enough to work there for several years and then grow with the company as it grew. It became the biggest outpatient provider in the world right now. Excuse me. And I think I was kind of somewhat a rising tide lifts all boats, and I was a beneficiary of that. But I spent 25 years there. I really grew with the industry, got to know the industry, and in the mid-90s, the company went through a merger with a German manufacturer who was more of a takeover than a merger. And at that time, a couple of colleagues of myself that had worked there for many years decided we wanted to go out and break out on our own. And as Joe mentioned, we all had pretty good senior positions in the company, and it was a risky move to take, but we saw an opportunity. And the opportunity was a unique business model which was not really that prominent in the outpatient dialysis field, and it was basically quite simple. We engaged the doctors to become partners in the joint venture of owning outpatient dialysis clinics. And heretofore was not really done that much. But we saw an opportunity because it was something that was really impacting our business model at the time, which was basically a salaried medical director model. So we'd see people leave the industry and leave our company to go own their own programs. So we went out and we decided to try to do this on our own. We thought we could do it better. And we went out and we raised $5 million in venture capital money. We met with 3 venture capitalists. We went with the 3rd venture capital group. And we were off and running. As one of my partners said, it was an interesting time for us because we came from senior positions and we were working out of our homes. And as one of my partners says, his wife kept saying, "Do you really think this is a pretty good idea?" And but we fortunately we had a lot of good relationships in the industry. It took us a year to open our first clinic, but we were off and running. We had $5 million in capital. We had milestones that we had to hit. We hit every one of those milestones, and we've grown to be, as Joe said, the 6th largest provider in the United States. So it was a daunting experience, but very rewarding. And I really look at my roots at Northeastern as something that enabled me to take this step after 25 years of being in a pretty comfortable position. So that's my kind of story.
When I think of entrepreneurship, it takes many forms and shapes, and it's certainly not just the shape of owning a business, which most of us probably never will. But it can certainly take the shape of an entrepreneurial attitude that you exercise as you work in organizations and you take different positions and so forth. So looking back on my career, which Joe described, which essentially went from as a clinical pharmacist in academia to biotech to large pharma and then venture capital, I'll describe probably the 2 or 3 changes that I view as the most career-changing and life-changing, if you will. And probably the first one was the switch from academia, from the safety of academia, to going to a biotech company, to join a very young biotech company in those early days, in that first wave of biotech in the late 80s, Genetics Institute. And I was the 2nd person in the clinical development group, which meant that you're driving at 60 miles an hour and changing the tire at the same time. We're literally writing SOPs and building infrastructure and filing INDs with the SOPs we're just writing at the same time to put the first few compounds, a number of very breakthrough new growth factors into the clinic. It was an invaluable experience, wearing many hats. Looking back on it, I'm not sure I wish to repeat it, but I'm incredibly grateful, and I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. And then continuing to grow and work in a diverse number of therapeutic areas in the sort of traditional CR&D roles that one has. I stayed with American Home Products when it purchased Genetics Institute a few years later, actually 10 years later. And probably but I should mention Northeastern because it actually played a key role in my change from academia to biotech. I got very involved at Dana-Farber in a number of research programs. I was the first pharmacist that was on the IRB. I actually had a couple of my own protocols that I was running. And I became very interested in research to a level that wasn't really met by what I learned in school. So that's what prompted me to actually do the Master's in Health Professions program at Northeastern, which allowed me not to just learn a number of skill sets that I just simply didn't have, or to put knowledge behind what I was already doing, but also it allowed me, and this is where the entrepreneurial fabric of Northeastern comes through the years, really customized the program to exactly what I needed. And I had advisors and professors that actually allowed me to do this and encouraged me to do it, to the point where I was doing one-on-one programs when I ran out of the courses I was interested in. So to this day, I'm very grateful because I got a lot out of that program. I felt like I did sort of a customized program for my needs. So probably the second big change was going from a very comfortable role in clinical research and development at Wyeth, a role where I had practically hired everybody in my group. I had a drug that was just approved, a very successful drug that I had taken from first in man to approval. I left that to join a newly formed group in the company called Experimental Medicine. I have a very dear former colleague sitting here. And this was an example of having a small entrepreneurial company, if you will, a venture within a very large pharma. And any of you that's worked in large pharma understand how challenging that can be, not just scientifically, but organizationally. So we were a group of 30 in a company of 60,000 people trying to champion the whole idea of translational medicine, better interface between discovery and development, finding biomarkers to run more informed trials within the organization, not just with the opinion leaders worldwide. And that was, again, going from safety, to repeat Chris's point, to sort of the unknown. I barely knew how to spell pharmacogenomics, and it was scary because 2 years later I was giving talks at meetings about, using pharmacogenomic biomarkers. But that's the power of trying something different and continuing to grow personally. So that was a life-changing experience. And I recall several people asking me, why would you leave CR&D? You have a drug approved, you have your group exactly the way you want it, you're going to this sort of unsafe thing of 30 people, you guys will disappear in 2 years, it's not viable. And my response was, if we disappear in 2 years, I will probably be one of 300 people worldwide that have done this. So I view this as a really marketable opportunity for me personally and growth. So again, I think you have to go with what your gut tells you, and even though it stretched me way out of my comfort zone scientifically, it was an invaluable experience. So I view it as one of the highlights of my career, as probably Catherine does. And the largest and the latest leap of faith in my career is recent, about 3 years ago, when I was networking extensively, looking at opportunities in biotech, where I thought I would end up in a senior development role. I serendipitously met a number of venture capital people, and one of the firms asked me to come in and interview. And I went in convinced they would lead nowhere because I'm not an investment banker, but I thought what a great opportunity to meet people and get their perspective of today's biotech model. And things continued to the point where actually I had an offer to consider. And I joined them. So it was a whole repackaging of all the skill sets in a totally different way. And I obviously haven't regretted it, and I would encourage you to stay very, very open. I think staying open and not a priori dismissing things because, oh, that's too different, I could never do that. At least explore it and don't rule out the possibility.